It can happen to anyone, even the most honest taxpayer. You miss something or you make a mistake, and through no fault of your own, you find yourself in debt to the IRS, up to thousands of dollars you don't have and can't pay. It's a nightmare scenario that happens to millions of Americans every year, but a leading tax expert says that one of the IRS's best-kept secrets is that you can be forgiven of tax debt you owe but cannot pay. The IRS has 4 programs in place to help you. The government won't tell you about them, but Dan Pilla does in his book, How to Get Tax Amnesty.
Well, tax expert Dan Pilla is with us. And I don't know how he writes so many books, but he's a prolific author. Very interesting. Dan, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
What is this secret the IRS doesn't want us to know about?
Well, there's a whole list of them, but let's start with a basic one. Now,
All right.
you mentioned in the promo here
Right.
that April 15th is coming, that millions of people are not going to be able to pay the taxes they owe. One of the best kept secrets the IRS has is the fact that you can get an extension of time to pay your taxes. Now, most people are aware of the filing extension,
Right.
Pat, and you just mentioned
Yeah,
that.
right.
You can get up to 6 additional months to file your tax return, but you still owe the taxes on April 15th. So the filing extension doesn't help you if you can't pay. However, there's a form the IRS doesn't tell you about.
All right.
It's Form 1127, Form 1127.
Okay.
It's called an application for an extension of time to pay the taxes. If you file that form on or before the due date of the tax return, which is actually April 17th this year.
All right.
The due date's April 17th because the 15th is on a Saturday. So if you file that Form 1127 before the due date,
Okay.
you can get up to 6 additional months to pay your taxes without penalties.
Without, or interest too?
Well, the interest still runs. The interest always runs, but you
Okay.
can avoid the penalties, which is significant, Pat.
Sure it
because
is.
the penalty is 1% a month for up to 25 months, and so it's...
Do you have to have any reason? Just ask for it.
You do need a reason.
What's the
It's
reason?
not automatic, and you have to show that you don't have the ability to pay the tax because of a financial hardship. So in other words, you've got to demonstrate to the IRS that you exercised reasonable business care and prudence in providing for your tax. In other words, you did the things that a reasonable person would do, knowing that you have to pay, but due to circumstances beyond your control, you couldn't pay on time. If you can demonstrate to that to the IRS, you'll get up to 6 additional months to pay the taxes.
They don't possibly have the personnel to litigate all that stuff, so they pretty much got to take your word for it.
Well, if there's some reasonable explanation, Pat, and some background, or some, I should say, support.
Yeah.
For example, if you say you've had some medical issues, for
Yeah.
example, if you attach a copy of your medical report to the Form 1127, that will help prove your case, and you're exactly right. You know, they can't drill down into all of this stuff, but you have to remember that the burden of proof is on the taxpayer with these things. The IRS doesn't have to prove your story is not true. Okay. You have to prove it is true.
All right, so you've got a legitimate debt. You owe the IRS, say, $10,000. You've got a way to get that mitigated. How do you do it?
Well, yeah, and let's talk about what the scope of the problem is.
Right.
You know, there's up to 25 million people in this country that have some kind of tax problem. About half of those people haven't filed their tax returns. So I talk about that in the book, How to Get Tax Amnesty, how to deal with that situation. But the other half of the people, 12, 15 million, owe substantial amounts of tax liability, Pat, and 60% of those people owe more than $25,000. So this is a big problem for folks.
They're terrified.
Yes, absolutely. And people are afraid to go to the mailbox. They're afraid to open letters from the IRS. They think the IRS is going to kick the door in and haul them off to jail. You know, first thing people need to understand, Pat, is when you're a garden variety tax debtor, you owe the money that you can't pay.
Yeah.
You're not going to jail. All right, so let's deal with the fear. No,
Why not?
Well, because it's not a crime to simply owe money to the IRS.
Okay.
It's a crime to cheat on your taxes. It's a crime to file a false return.
Okay.
It's a crime to lie to the IRS. All those things are true. But just simply not having the money to pay is not. It makes you broke, Pat. It doesn't make you a criminal, right?
Broke is bad, but it's not a crime.
So you're not going to jail. So let's deal with the fear. Let's get the fear out of it,
So you
okay?
owe $25,000. What do you do?
All right, so now the IRS has a flagship program that they call an offer and compromise program. I talk about it in the book at length. There's actually 3 different varieties of this program. And under this program, what happens is, let's say you owe the IRS $50,000.
Right.
You go in there and you say, look, guys, I owe you 50 grand. There's no way I can pay 50,000, but I can pay, let's say, 5 or 10,000. Now, it's based on your ability to pay. So each person's circumstances are going to be different. It's not an automatic thing. And again, the burden of proof is on you. But if you can demonstrate to the IRS that between your capacity to make a monthly payment and your equity and assets, between those two things, you can't pay the tax you owe, they will reduce or in some cases even eliminate the tax liability.
Well, equity means your home, it means
That's
your
right.
car, it means your stocks. I mean, they're going to liquidate everything before they accept that, aren't
Well,
they?
and assuming the taxpayer has those things to begin with, Pat.
Yeah, right.
But when we're talking about people that owe $50,000 to the IRS, these folks don't have anything to begin with, typically speaking. All right, so most people are going to qualify at some level for a compromise of this kind. Now, as I said, there's 3 different varieties. Right. So even if you've got equity in your house, you can qualify for an offer in compromise under other circumstances if you can prove that payment will cause a hardship. Just for example, suppose you're a senior citizen. You've got some medical issues. You got a little bit of money in a savings account, a 401k or an IRA, but you need that money to take care of your medical issues.
Sure.
In that situation, you might not have to give any of it to the IRS.
Well, who do you talk to? Do you go to Washington, or is there a local field officer?
Well, the first thing you do is you get the book How to Get Tax Amnesty, because that's what it tells you where to go and how to do this. But in answer to your question, Pat, in a fair answer to your question is there's a specific form. It's Form 656. It's called an offer in compromise form that you submit. And that offer goes to a special unit. IRS has got a couple of them around the country. It's called an offer and compromise unit. And these people are specifically trained to evaluate these offers, communicate with taxpayers, find out, what their situation is, income, assets, expenses, liabilities, special circumstances, health issues, all these things taken into consideration. I lay it out in the book in great detail. I show you exactly step by step how to do it. I show you how to negotiate with these people, because that's what it is, a negotiation.
Well, have they been taught now to be nice, or they've been taught to be nasty? I mean, they've been beat up pretty bad. I've got an organization that beat them up pretty bad in court, and they're still. They offered a compromise in court.
Yep. Well, the answer is it depends who you're dealing with. I mean, you've got 85,000 employees in the IRS, and very often the experience you have with the Internal Revenue Service is dependent on which individual you're working with. Now, I've been doing this for 35 years, as you know. You and I have been talking about this for 20 years, I think. But I've dealt with thousands of these people across the country. I'm talking about individuals now, and it runs the gamut. You get individuals that don't want to help. Unfortunately, there's a few of those. Most of the people in the IRS want to help. Most of the people in the IRS want to find a way to fix the problem. Most of them do. But still, Pat, it's so important for people to understand that the burden of proof is on the taxpayer. Okay. The IRS never needs a reason to say no. They need 56 excuses to say yes, and you have to give them the reasons.
Do they get brownie points for collecting money? I mean, is there a certain score that he brought in $100,000?
Well, there used to be a lot of concern about that very issue, whether the IRS was paid on commission. And as part of the 1998 Restructuring and Reform Act, there's a law that specifically states that they can't be paid on commission based on, well, not paid on commission. They never were paid on commission, but their evaluations can't be based on what they collect or how many audits they conduct or these types of things. It has to be based on accuracy.
Well, are there other ways to ensure that you're going to get the best situation? Or it's all in the book. It's not just one way, is it? Oh,
no, there's dozens. I talk about dozens of strategies, but let's talk about an important one here. Every single person that faces a tax liability is terrified that the IRS is going to hit the bank account, seize the paycheck, tow away the automobile. Levies and seizures are a very important concern, Pat, because they do happen, all right? But here's the thing that's important. Before the IRS can touch a nickel's worth of your assets, they have to mail a notice called a final notice of intent to levy. It's a 30-day notice. It says if you don't pay up in 30 days, we can take your property. However, that notice does contain an appeal right. It's called a right to a collection due process appeal. A collection due process appeal is one of the most important rights that taxpayers have, and this was created as a result of the 1998 Restructuring Act as well. When you respond to that letter within 30 days by asking for an appeal hearing, a collection due process appeal, two important things happen. First and foremost is you stop collection in its tracks. The IRS can't touch a nickel's worth of your assets until you've had a right to that hearing. Secondly, the case is taken out of the hands of the collection function. These are the guys that want to steal your bank account, right? And it's put into the hands of the appeals office. The written job description of the appeals office, Pat, is to negotiate settlements with taxpayers.
Really?
Absolutely. And so you have now the right to submit what the law calls collection alternatives. The IRS wants the money now. I, as a taxpayer, want an alternative to full payment. I've got all kinds of options. The offer in compromise we talked about is one of them. An installment agreement is another one. Penalty cancellation. I can pay the tax, but I want to get rid of the penalties. That's another option. There's all kinds of options under this collection alternative banner. And that's where you have the right to present this stuff without fear of enforcement.
And say, I owe you 50, but here's $5,000, here's a check certified. And if they take it and they say yes, then they write off 45.
It's an oversimplification what you just said, but the bottom line is exactly that. And you know, we negotiate these offers with the IRS all the time, and it's not unusual to get 10 cent or 15 cent on the dollar settlements. But just as common, Pat, depending on the situation, is maybe well, let me give you an example. I've had taxpayers here that we worked with very recently that owed about $65,000 to the IRS that we settled for $350.
Come on!
$350 because that was their ability to pay. You see, these offers are based on your ability to pay.
Dan, you're a valuable resource, and I know people are. Get this book, How to Get Tax Amnesty, Dan Pilla. And are you available to work with people if they want to hire you?
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. And as a matter of fact, we've got an offer for CBN viewers.
Okay.
You know, you go to cbn.com to get the book.
Okay.
And any CBN viewer that orders through that process is going to get a free 15-minute consultation directly with me, personally with me.
All right, Dan, you're terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, stuff you didn't know. So why lose sleep at night? Why worry about going to jail, having your assets when you've got Dan Pilla telling you how to make a compromise with the IRS, how to get tax valuable as April the 15th approaches. Dan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Pat.